Hello friends, welcome back to another video in the Professional Author Toolkit series. This is going to be a video on personal branding. And before we get into it, I want to just talk about something really quick that I think is sort of relevant to the conversation as a whole. But even more than that is just my own lived experience, and I think helpful to my greater goal in encouraging you in your pursuit of being a full-time author, or being an author in whatever way that you want to. And so what I want to talk about is how over the last couple of weeks I have just not been doing well in terms of writing, in terms of maintaining my mental health, in terms of all sorts of things. And, I am tremendously fortunate. I'm tremendously fortunate that I have an incredibly strong network and an incredibly strong safety net. And that comes through my wife and my children and my, my wider community. I have very strong community, and the result is that I have a lot of support. And so things haven't been going well for the last couple of weeks, but they could have gone a lot worse. And so I'm very thankful for that. And I'm now starting to come out of that period. But the only reason I'm bringing this up, I'm not bringing this up for sympathy. I'm not bringing this up because I need you to do something or say something. The reason I'm bringing it up is because I don't ever want to maintain an air of invincibility. I don't ever want to pretend that I'm not just another person who's trying their best to do this thing that we all love doing. I don't ever want to be, disingenuous in terms of who I am and the message I convey. And I think that this whole experience has been really eye-opening for me, and it has been reinforcing for me. It has reinforced these principles that I always talk about. Because at the end of the day, I realized that the thing I needed to do is the thing I always talk about. I was having a tremendous amount of trouble writing last week. I attempted to write every day last week, and I wrote a grand total of 2,500 words. And I did that struggling over the course of 5 days. To put that into perspective, before getting on to make this video today, I've already written 11,800 words, and I have the majority of the day still left to keep writing. Okay, so that's the discrepancy, right? So what do you do when you have a week like that, or a couple of weeks like that, or a month like that? Well, you just keep going. You clear your head, you clear your mental space, you clear your desk, you rebuild your habits so that you can get back into it. We all go through these periods where things just don't work, where everything is rough. And the reasons that I was in that mental frame and that I was in that period are manifold. Like, there was a lot of sickness in our house, and that combined with some exhaustion and some burnout from this past fall, and a lot of the emotional turmoil that I've been going through, it just sort of came to a head, and it really put me down for a couple of weeks. But that's okay. It's all right. We average in years. We don't average in days or weeks. If I just looked at my performance, for the last 2 weeks, I could be pretty miserable with myself. But I'm not doing that. Instead, I'm taking the lessons I've learned. I'm taking the correction that life has handed me, and I am persevering, and I'm continuing to move forward. And I'm doing so with intentionality. And I think that more than anything else, sorry that this isn't, in relation to the video we're just about to talk about. So I appreciate all of you who have, borne with me as we got through this. But I just think it's so incredibly important to be very truthful. We all have bad days. We all have bad weeks. Sometimes we have bad months. Sometimes we have bad years. And I don't ever want to pretend to be somebody I'm not. So yeah. Anyway, hopefully that is helpful in your own journey as you look at it. We can have bad days, and becoming successful in the thing you're trying to be successful in, being a professional author or being a full-time author isn't going to make that stop. You're still going to have days when it's hard to write. You're still going to have days when it just sort of sucks, and you have to sit on the couch for a while or play Evil Geniuses 2, as I did. Branding is a really tricky subject, and there's a lot of information out there, and I think the majority of it is wrong. I don't think it's right. Because a lot of times what happens is when you're discussing a brand, especially an author brand, you say, okay, how does the individual want to be represented, right? What do we want to represent about this person that's going to make them well-liked by everybody? And, as I have pursued branding in that way, because that's the general advice you get when you look up, how do I brand myself? That it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I struggled for many years with trying to understand it. Why is this not working? What's wrong here? And then I came to an understanding through some conversations with other people that really clarified for me the actual question of branding. The question of branding is not, how do I want to represent myself? The question of branding is, what do I want my readers to experience? What is the core experience that I want my readers to have? Because when my readers interact with me, they're going to have an experience, guaranteed. Now, I'm they might send me a message and I might respond, and that's the experience, or they might send me a message and I might not respond, which is also, incidentally, an experience. So no matter how you're approaching your readers, they're going to have an experience of you. So the question is not, how do I want to represent myself? It's, what experience do I want them to have? So I have a clear sense of the experience that I want my readers to have. And everything I do is built around generating that experience. So for me, it is my goal that my reader's experience is uplifting. I want every interaction I have with people to be uplifting. I want it to be not just positive, but I want them to feel better after interacting with me than they did before they interacted with me. I want them to feel better after reading my books than they did before they read my books. I want them to be more excited about the worlds that I build after experiencing the worlds that I build. And so really, in a sense, I think of myself as, my brand is that of a magician, delighting an audience, right? Ushering people into a magical world. And that's really what I'm focused on. But again, we arrive there not through asking, what sort of thing do I want to communicate to my readers? No, we ask, what kind of experience do I want them to have? Now, you might have, a different one. You don't have to pick the same as mine. You might say, well, I'd really love my readers to be intrigued, to want more. I'd really love for my readers to feel that particular sense of adrenaline-fueled fear, right, after they read my books. That's the experience that I want my readers to have. Cool. Then orchestrate everything in your brand to try and deliver that experience. And in doing this, you're going to find that all of a sudden, all of the actions that you take in order to brand yourself start to make sense, right? Because once you have a filter through which you can observe all of the actions that you might possibly take, it's going to become really quickly apparent which actions are good and which actions are not, right? You're going to look at two thumbnails, or you're going to look at two social media posts, and you're going to be able to tell which one is going to lend itself towards the reader experience that you actually want. But let's get into some nitty-gritty about how we should actually approach this, right? So we've asked the question, what is my reader experience? What is the optimal reader experience? And once we've answered that, we want to set some ground rules. The first is simple over complex, right? We want to make sure that that everything that we're doing is simple, that it's clearly communicated, that there is no ambiguity in it, right? We don't want people leaving confused. Confusion is the number one killer of sales, right? Somebody not knowing what they're looking at is the first reason people don't buy. Like the absolute basic first reason they don't buy, because they just don't know what it is. And so if they don't know what it is, they're not going to take the actions that you want them to take. Now, that could be as simple as sign up for my newsletter. If you make it super complex, if in your copy you make it really complex, then most people are just going to bounce off your newsletter, right? They're not going to sign up for it. That's why the single most effective prompt to get someone to sign up for your newsletter is sign up for my newsletter. And that's it. Because it's very clear what you're asking them to do. And because people know what a newsletter is, there's nothing else that's needed. Right? Now you could make it more specific. Sign up for my newsletter where I'll send you free books. Even more specific. And people who want free books are very likely to sign up. But what's interesting is that people who don't want free books won't sign up. They just won't, because they don't want free books. And so if the thing you're offering or the thing that you're trying to communicate, the action that you're trying to communicate is very, very specific, then everybody who doesn't want that specific thing is going to bounce, right? And so that's why simple over complex is the rule of thumb. When you're thinking about your core brand, right? When you're thinking about that question, what's my core reader experience? The same thing is true. Simple over complex, because the more complex you make it, the harder it is to achieve. The simpler you make it, the easier it is to achieve. This applies to how we title things. This applies to our blurbs. This applies to how we, do our book covers. The more complex something is, the more confusion it generates, the less likely somebody is to buy. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have some complexity because you feel like it's necessary, you can't just clearly explain. Under your post, you specifically identify some of the major confusion points. The problem is that in order to understand where people get confused, you have to give it to people, and then they have to be confused. And that's why just simple, clear communication is always going to be better. As straightforward as possible. And now I'm going to say something that's probably not going to be very popular. At the end of the day, if you are trying to sell a book and you have a brand that's, say, epic fantasy, you are going to have a much easier time selling your books if you compare to a popular epic fantasy author who people already know and like. And as long as you can convince people that your books are similar, which usually just takes saying, people who like Brandon Sanderson love this. If you can do that, then you're going to find people are buying your books. If instead you focus on how interesting and unique and special your writing is and how it's different from Brandon Sanderson's, you're not going to sell books. Sorry. Because complexity creates confusion, and confusion is the first barrier to buying. So, I could beat this drum literally all day, but simplicity is better than complexity when you're trying to sell something. Just be upfront and direct. And if there's a really popular series out right now and you wrote a book that's similar to it, say, hey, my book's similar to that. People can discover the uniqueness. They can discover the magic in your writing. And if you give them the opportunity to discover the magic in your writing, and they actually buy the book, right, because they like Brandon Sanderson, and so they buy your epic fantasy book, then all of a sudden they're going to go around telling people, hey, this is like Sanderson, but here are the things I liked about it more, right? Allow them to generate that complexity. You don't need that. Instead, you just need to be like, hey, this is what this is. This is the simplest way to understand it, and you should buy it. All right, so the last thing that we're going to talk about, and because of the intro in the beginning of this video, I feel like I'm all over the place right now, but the last thing we're going to talk about is public versus private personas. And this is a tricky subject. And this is a tricky subject because there is very clearly a right answer, but that right answer is hard. So, you should not have a public and a private persona. You should just be you. Now, why is that hard? It's hard because when you become a public person, that is, when you put yourself out as an author and you start engaging with readers, all of a sudden you're going to feel a tremendous amount of pressure to conform in a bunch of different ways. You're going to feel this tremendous pressure to change who you are, to start dressing differently, to start acting differently, to start engaging with people differently. But you shouldn't. You should be you. At the same time, you should be the best, most interesting, most friendly, most joyful version of you. And that can be really tough. It can be really tough to pull all of the positive parts of yourself to the surface and to hold them there while you interact with other people. I'm not saying that, people can't know when you struggle. No, people can totally know when you struggle. But you shouldn't ever make your struggle other people's problem. You shouldn't ever take your bad day and make it somebody else's problem. Because that's not what they signed up for in this parasocial relationship. People talk about parasocial relationships as if they are only one way, right? That's the definition of it, right? You have a celebrity, and then all of these people feel like they have a relationship with the celebrity. Here's the thing, though. If the celebrity shows up to interact with fans, then it is a two-way relationship. There are now two people who are involved and interacting. And so, just as the fan should respect the boundaries of the person they're talking to, the celebrity should respect the humanity of the person they're talking to, of the fan. Now, I don't think in any way, shape, or form I'm a celebrity, but as soon as you start putting yourself out into the public, in any way, shape, or form, going to a book fair, doing anything like that, you're gonna see this dynamic at play. And so there's this really tricky balance between being yourself and also respecting the people that you're interacting with and only bringing your best. And that, I think, is hard to do. It's just hard to do. So, I think that's all I have to say on that subject, right? You shouldn't have a public persona where you pretend to be somebody and a private persona, which is who you really are. You should have one persona. You should just be yourself. But when you're out in public, when you're interacting with fans, when you're responding to messages, it is your responsibility as a professional. It is your responsibility to bring your A game, to bring the best of you to that conversation, to that interaction. And we're all human, and we all make mistakes, and sometimes we don't handle things as well as we should. I've certainly had instances where I did not handle new authors, interactions with new authors as well as I should have. But I think that this is something we just need to constantly remind ourselves of. Being an author means stepping into the public sphere. Whether or not you become a celebrity, that's irrelevant. When you step into the public sphere, it is so vitally important that you bring yourself, that you bring who you truly are, but also that you bring the best parts of yourself. So remember how I said I didn't have any more to say, and then I prattled on for a little while? Well, I'm actually done now. Anyway, thank you for listening to this absolutely mess of a video. What a disaster. That's okay, though. This is who I am, right? The brain's all over the place right now. So, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you get something out of it. If nothing else, just that, your brand is really just about what you're hoping your readers experience in your work, right? What kind of messages you're trying to communicate. And as long as you focus there, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You don't need anything elaborate. In fact, less elaborate is better. Simplicity, right? So if you have any questions, want further clarification, leave me comments down below. If there's other subjects that you'd like me to talk about in future videos, definitely leave those down there as well. And go ahead and comment and tell me, have you ever interacted with a celebrity or with somebody who is famous and had a really good experience? What specifically did you find good about it? I'd love to know.